open source is a really important option for the government for a couple of reasons. I don't think it's any big surprise that we're operating in a unique era these days where everyone's very fiscally constrained and everybody is being asked to do more with less. And with that backdrop, I think there's a couple of key areas where open source can really make a big positive difference. One is that it really is a great alternative these days to replacing those expensive proprietary infrastructure and platform components with open source solutions. And by doing so, we're able to reduce the overhead that it costs the IT department to deliver those critical applications and services out to the lines of business users, therefore reducing that overhead and overall establishing better value to the organization through the IT department and giving us more opportunity to go out and innovate. The second big area that I think makes open source a real important alternative in this day and age is it gives us areas to explore areas of capability that organizations otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. There's lots of standard challenges that every department and agency faces, from business intelligence to content management, knowledge management, you name it, whether it's infrastructure, capability, applications. And every organization has a certain budget they have to operate in, and if at the end of the day, if the budget's been consumed or largely consumed and they don't have the space to pursue those other objectives, they simply can't in the proprietary world. Well, in the open source world, that door might be might not be shut, right? We might still have some opportunity to go out and pursue those new capabilities where we otherwise simply couldn't afford it, because the raw cost of the software alone, much less the implementation, would put it well without the reach. So my role in supporting open source growth within the government really still focuses on a lot of different ways. But one principal area that I really get out and do a lot is one of simple education and advocacy. I still find that a lot of places within the government, you run into a lot of misinformation about whether open source solutions are viable, whether they're secure, whether they're supportable. And going in and helping break down some of those barriers and those common layers of misinformation is a very important aspect of what I do. So the first is, I think that everyone that's exploring open source in the government really should go ahead and tackle those security and viability questions right up front. Let's cut through that misinformation and get those questions answered right away, right? And just dispel the disinformation that all the proprietary software vendors have done such a good job of over the years of ingraining in everyone's head. The second is, let's really start to visualize and articulate the cost savings that are available here. When proprietary vendors come in and talk about campaigns to replace one component with another, we're generally talking in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% cost savings and ROI. When we look at replacing some of those same components with open source solutions, the equation starts to look much more in the neighborhood of 70, 80, even 90% cost savings. And that's the case where it doesn't become apples to apples, it becomes apples to oranges, but only in a good way, right? I'd say the third thing to kind of consider is that we need to be upfront about the reinvestment of some of those savings. Invariably, as we swap out those components that we've been used to, there's going to be some level of training, of implementation costs, migration costs, consulting, whatever the case may be. We may have to reinvest some portion of what we've saved into those efforts, but ultimately we're still coming out way ahead. And the last thing I'd say is, especially in this day and age of virtualization, and a lot of these tools are very easy to bring down and get going very quickly. And just putting that picture in front of somebody that really shows how professional these open source solutions are, how feature rich they are, really makes the picture solidify to those decision makers. So we've seen that the cloud movement on the commercial side has really been built on open source. Everybody from Amazon to IBM, all the major cloud providers out there are going with open source solutions. And in my mind, that's for a couple of key reasons. One is the economies of the cloud movement mandate that we consider open source solutions. But two, it's the first big technology disruption since kind of the mainstream adoption of open source. And I think those two components came together to tell a real compelling story. So as the government pursues cloud-based computing, they're obviously not in a position for a variety of reasons to pursue some of the mainline public offerings. But as they implement cloud, be it private, be it community, something somewhat behind the government firewall, if you will, it's important that we take that same lesson learned and build our government cloud solutions on that same open model for sake of interoperability and for sake of not getting locked into the cloud. If we build our cloud solutions on proprietary solutions, we're just going to see that cloud lock-in is the next generation of vendor lock-in, just outsourced to somebody else's data center. You know, I'm surprised that I still see and get this question so often, especially in the day and age where open source is powering, some of the most secure systems in the world at the NSA and some of the most fault-tolerant systems in the world at the New York Stock Exchange. And I think that this question still largely propagates from that misinformation that's out there that's so been baked into everybody's heads for so long by some of the proprietary vendors. And I usually start trying to break that down in a couple of specific ways. As first and foremost, companies like Red Hat, that's one of their specific value points that they're really there to provide to their customers, is that level of assurance, that level of rigor, that level of testing to take these community solutions and make them ready for the enterprise. The second is going in and helping the organization break down and understand the governance structure under which they routinely operate. And what we find is that under those governance structures, a lot of these solutions really are already approved, they're already in use, and they've already got the certifications and accreditations that are needed to operate in those environments. But the government being as large as it is, some of that information just doesn't get down to all the particular pockets. Another great area where I like to talk about security of open source solutions is just being a real believer in the model itself. Where in the vendor proprietary world would you find a piece of software that was tested by millions of people over 18 months or longer before it ever hit the streets? That would be unheard of. Whereas that's the commonplace. That is the model in the vendor-backed open source world, and that really tells a much more compelling story. And within the specific context of security, lets us ferret out and correct a lot of those security deficiencies before anything really even gets into the enterprise. This is another area that's of a lot of interest to me, in that the open source model, or just bringing communities of individuals with shared problems together, has a lot of applicability in the government. The government is kind of known for operating IT within stovepipes, but we see a lot of areas where there's very common practices, from how we provision machines to how we configure machines, how we secure and patch machines. These are things that systems administrators and IT architects are designing and doing within every agency and department out there. And there can be a lot of commonality and a lot of good and a lot of cost savings that can come from bringing those communities of systems administrators and IT architects together to share, to solve those problems as a community. Now, there's always the risk of giving too much power away to the upstream authority, right? But what the community model affords is we can let the community solve 80% of the problem for us, and we can maintain and reserve that ability to solve the last 10 to 20% down at the local level. So we get the benefits of the centralized IT, but we still have the power and the flexibility to make it unique to what our specific challenges are down on the ground. I think there's a lot of great areas of low-hanging fruit, specifically within the application space. I mentioned a little while ago that there's common challenges in the areas of business intelligence, knowledge management, content management, places that are opportunities and capabilities that every organization needs. And there are great open source solutions that are out there at the application level that are solving these exact challenges. The White House website these days is all built on an open source content management management system, Drupal. Jaspersoft is an extensively used business intelligence platform within the government. These are application level capabilities that have already been well proven, well vetted within the government and within the public sector that we can easily bring in as low-hanging fruit. The other, albeit perhaps not the flashiest solution around, RHEL as an alternative to Solaris and AIX and some of the more legacy Unix components. There's no component probably more widely used and well respected and trusted within the public sector than Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And for that reason alone, it's always going to be one of the first areas of focus where we can go and show someone a product that is superior in terms of its functionality and offers tremendous cost savings over its proprietary alternatives.